I've been very excited about this conversation. I don't know that we've ever met in person. Chief Randy Brice from the Queen Creek Police Department. Chief, it's good to meet you, or good to see you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Unfortunately, we're meeting and talking about an upcoming anniversary of the death of Preston Lord, the murder of Preston Lord, and there has been so much talk about East Valley violence and what has been done about it, what wasn't being done about it. Can you first update us on the Preston Lord case? Can you just give an update on what's happening and what's going on?
Yeah, I think most people have seen probably in the news, a lot of the 7 individuals that were indicted. There's been various hearings for bail and release. And so while that's nothing that we control, that's just more of a note that those are some of the things that happen as the case progresses towards trial. So we're still waiting trial.
Is it typical to take this long?
In this complicated a case, yes.
Because I just want to clear that up for people, that this is not something that's a unique circumstance, that this is, unfortunately and frustratingly for people, even in law enforcement, the wheels grind slowly. Yeah,
I actually think this is actually rather quick. And I know people are frustrated with not only the police, but the county attorney in this situation. But this is actually pretty fast. To have a homicide case this complex to go to trial this quickly is pretty fast.
So the criticism that happened about this was that this was happening kind of under the nose of law enforcement, and it was being either ignored or it wasn't taken seriously. Can you clear up what your agency saw and how it ended up where you are now?
Sure. So I think when people think of the East Valley, they kind of lump us all together as one group, and we do work together that well. But this particular case was one of our first forays into this kind of attack. We'd never seen this before. We had been working, we opened in 2022, January 22, and we're not live that long after this happened. So we had been working really closely with all of our partners, but never seen this kind of attack. But while it may have been happening in other places, we did not see it. So this was a defining moment for not only us, but the East Valley.
Well, when the Queen Creek Police Department, when the agency came to fruition, the accusation was, of course, that it was so new, as if the people that were involved in leadership weren't seasoned. Can you clear that up? Because of your career and your command staff, the career in law enforcement, of the leadership that stood up this agency.
Yeah, I mean, just my command staff, the 3 of us at the time when we first opened, it was, almost 100 years of experience. So we're talking about, yes, we're a brand new police agency, and which hasn't been seen in Arizona for almost 20 years, at least from municipal department. But our agency individuals, and especially the command staff, very well seasoned. We hired almost entirely lateral police officers, which means they were already police officers somewhere else, had experience. So yes, very experienced organizationally from a personnel perspective, but a brand new police department.
So was it, for you personally, was it new for you to have to deal with people like me in the media in your position as the chief, that you are now the voice and the face of this agency, and now this huge case comes in and then criticism starts to come in? Was that something that was new for you to handle?
In a sense, yes, because, I started with the sheriff's office, worked almost 25 years, a little over 24 years there, and then went to Gilbert, but I was only there a few years as their assistant chief. So I wasn't really necessarily the voice at either one of those organizations, not directly in this kind of thing, but in Queen Creek, it was me. And I'll be honest with you, it was a lot of pressure, and it was a difficult time to be brand new and have this come up.
So what then, what have you learned? I want to get into the progress of what's happening in the East Valley, but what have you learned in this experience? What has it taught you?
Well, so while I'm very proud of everything that the organization did, I learned a lot personally on how to manage these kind of very difficult situations. Not that a homicide case is new, but the circumstances in this case were very unique. And because of the amount of criticism and interest in the case.
Scrutiny, yeah. Scrutiny. I mean, the limelight, you guys had the spotlight on you.
Yes, absolutely, and from day one. And so this was what I probably learned most, just from a chief perspective, is that it's super important for us to be out in the media early and giving as much information as possible. While I think we did a good job, I think we could have done a better job from my agency perspective. I wish we'd been out there a little earlier just to clear things up.
Chief Randy Brice is joining us from the Queen Creek Police Department. Yeah, I worked with somebody that used to say you can never over-communicate in a crisis. And I've repeated that over and over again in my own head, because I think if you clam up, then that's when people start to guess at things. And so let me ask about your background, because before we went on the air, you grew up in the East Valley.
Yeah, I grew up in Mesa, an Arizona native, and went to high school in Mesa.
So how does this, serving in that community, like you said, people lump you together because you can drive from one town to the other, and unless you see a different patrol car, you don't realize you've driven into a different city. What is it like patrolling and running and standing up an agency in the community you grew up in?
Well, the crazy thing here is not only we've seen this massive growth, but we started this, the police department, in the middle of the pandemic. With supply chain problems, in the middle of the conversation about George Floyd. So this was a very difficult time to stand up a police department. So it was a lot of pressure. But as you said, people don't really define our borders. They just see police. That's all they hear. So it's really important that we're in sync with one another as we work through these issues.
How has the agency grown? How have you changed and grown just in the couple of years you've been in existence?
So we started with only 73 people. We've already more than doubled our size in just 2.5 years, which is crazy. But we're responding to the growth in the activity. We've seen at least a 400% increase in emergency calls from the day we started, and about 60% or 40 to 60% of the other type of calls. So it is just growing exponentially in the East Valley, especially where we're at. So we just have to be really responsive and work together as a group.
Yes, so the massive growth is really good. I was just out there for an event recently at the Botanical Gardens out in the East, and it's just a beautiful area. But with that also comes an increase in crime. Are you guys able to keep up? Or are you having struggles with manpower shortages like other Valley cities are?
So great question. A couple of things is, even with this particular case, our Queen Creek is extremely safe community. We have a very low crime rate, but the activity, as you said, as more people gather, the more stuff you have to deal with, whether that's quality of life issues or whatever. So we've been very lucky. We have a very supportive community, very supportive council, and we are growing with the growth. And luckily, we've not had difficulty hiring people.
All right, we've got Chief Brice with us in the Queen Creek Police Department. Let's talk about East Valley violence, what you've learned and what's happening, that there was this scrutiny that not enough was being done. And I've talked with other chiefs from the East Valley, and what I've heard from Gilbert and from Mesa is they are complimentary of the other chiefs in the area, that you have really worked together as a coalition to send a stern message and to stop what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the part that's going to be most effective is, well, not only the police are working together, but when the public is working with us at the same time. So that synchronicity is where the magic that happens. So yeah, absolutely. We've been now, I understand that the scrutiny in the beginning of this was, why didn't you guys see this? And hindsight's always 20/20. For us, we had never seen this type of swarming, is what we're kind of calling it, until this event. But as we look back and start to see all those different things, it's a little more clear.
And there's a difference between kids fighting. I mean, we all were in high school. I don't know what you were like in high school, but I don't want to remind anybody what I was like in high school. I mean, I fought. We all hung out at a movie theater. Cops all knew where we were. If a fight happened, it happened in that parking lot. Boys fought. That happened. But there was a difference between boys fighting and what you're calling swarming, these events where these attacks were happening to people. And it looked, when it was on social media, really dangerous.
Well, yeah, and again, the problem here, and I get what you're saying, there's conflict between people and places, and people work those things out. These are just cold-blooded attacks, and to the point where you have multiple people on a single individual or maybe a couple of individuals, but that's why it's so nefarious, is that the way they do it is so the potential for injury is just really there.
And the sensationalization of then posting it on social media and then how that makes its rounds with young people has to add to that as well, because not only are they doing it, but now they're doing it for effect.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this with the rise of social media in general, is the excitement to have their
right.
content out there and people to see it, and they want the likes. And it's such a strange thing to see violence being the thing that they put out there to get likes.
And in hindsight, how stupid it is that you're going to commit a crime like this and then post the video of it yourself on your own account. That had to come back to bite them. What message do you send? How are you getting the message to young people that it's not going to be tolerated and it's going to end badly for you?
So the two hopes here is that, one, we have people that these bad actors, that we are going to get you. We're going to hold you responsible. And if you commit this kind of crime, we have the structure and the will to do those things. But we also want people to be prepared on the other side of that, the potential victims, to watch out and be cognizant of the situations that they're in.
Chief Brice is joining us. He is the Queen Creek Police Chief, talking East Valley violence as we approach the anniversary of the murder of Preston Lord. So what is the message to parents? Is there a line that's crossed where parents now become responsible, that they either knew or should have known, and that they're going to be held accountable for the acts of their children?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see this across the nation, is that prosecutors are starting to hold parents responsible for their child's actions. Now, the laws have to be there for that to happen, and we do have some. But the point I think is the most important that you're making is that this stuff can be nipped in the bud if parents are paying attention, if they're accountable and hold their kids accountable. And it's the little things. Don't be out past midnight. Don't be drinking. Don't be using, drugs. It's simple things that can make the biggest difference.
Knowing where your kids are, which I know is impossible all the time. I think every kid goes through this as they grow up, telling their parents the things they got away with. It's different in some of these circumstances, because when it becomes dangerous, when it's like, I don't want to compare children to pets, but when you know you have a dog with a propensity to bite, you are now on notice to make sure your dog doesn't bite someone. If you have a child that has a propensity for drug use or propensity for violence, are those parents now on notice that you have an extra duty to make sure they're not doing these things?
Yeah, I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but these things are interrelated. When you have this symptom and this symptom, you typically start to have some other problems. So you have to pay close attention when you start seeing those things. And there's people that can help. You're not alone as a parent. That's the great thing, is that there are ways to get help with your kids and those things, but you've got to hold them accountable and pay attention. That's really the key.
Are you confident that you're getting a handle on this? Are you seeing a corner being turned? Are kids and their parents getting the message?
I think in general, yes. But that's not that we don't take our foot off the pedal at this point. We have got to keep the momentum going. And I always get nervous to say, hey, we turned the corner, because I don't want people to feel comfortable. I want them to be on edge a little bit, to know that we have to stay vigilant about this. And I think that's the nice thing about remembering Preston at this 1 year mark, is that we cannot forget him and what that represents. We need people to pay attention and continue. But in general, yes, I do think we're getting our hands around this particular type of thing, but we're not immune to violence.
And you bring up a good point. And by the way, this is my opinion. I'm not putting words in the chief's mouth, but I think people are upset that we seem to not focus on the victims enough, that what ends up happening is an arrest is made. Now the focus is on the perpetrators, and it's no longer focused on Preston Lord's family and friends will be forever changed in this. And so justice needs to happen for those families, and they should never be forgotten.
Yeah, and what I'm nervous about, and this is, the 1 year mark is typically you'll see people are still interested, but as the time goes on, sometimes we forget about the victims. And it's really, really important, because I think the humanizing these situations is where we really help drive our interest and our momentum. So we cannot forget Preston or the family, and remember that, look, we need to really continue to be vigilant about this. But yeah, have to remember the victims.
There was a case in Florida where I think it was an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old kid not only made threats against the school, but he also was found with an arsenal of weapons. And that sheriff not only arrested this young man, but he perp walked him and said to the parents, if you're not going to raise your kids, we are. Chief Walther in Scottsdale was talking about these threats against schools, and he actually said the phrase, we need to bring shame back. Is there an element of that, of exposing these young people, and instead of them being sensationalized for these acts, is there some value in them being being ashamed of what they've done?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to the word accountability, and I do agree with Jeff when he talks about that from the suspect perspective. But I think the parents need to be in that same bucket, because if their kids are doing this, not to say that there aren't great parents that have problems,
right?
But we need to make sure that if they're not handling what they need to, or they're not holding their kids accountable, because oftentimes what we hear is, well, my kid would never have done that. Well, we found a gun, and he brought,
or the accusations of parents covering for their children.
Yeah, and we saw that in our case. In fact, we saw people basically blocking our efforts. So it's out there, and we're painting this broad brush to say all parents are this way, and I'm not saying that at all. There's a lot of great parents out there that do a lot of great things. We're talking about a very small population here, but we need to hold these parents accountable. And back to your point is, bring it to light.
And you have to make that distinction. I mean, that's your job, is that you have to make that distinction between someone that did a bad thing or someone that is a criminal, or some parents that didn't know what was going on, or parents that are turning a blind eye and covering up for their kids, and that's got to be difficult.
It is, and remember that the juvenile justice system is about rehabilitation. It's not about incarcerating kids for the rest of their lives. But there are kids and there are laws specifically where young kids do such severe things that they're held accountable as adults, like in our case. So there are mechanisms for that, but parents need to remember that it's not necessarily a bad thing for your kid to get in trouble when it's time to be in trouble. You know, if we have to hold them accountable, and we're part of that mechanism.
Yeah, what could be a very bad situation for them now may seem small 10 years from now if it changes the course of their life.
Absolutely, and that's the thing is that people sometimes feel like we're the enemy. You know, we don't want to work with you, but we are really here to help parents facilitate these kind of things, and we want to get these kids back on the right track, but we have to hold them accountable in order to do that.
Chief, I appreciate the time. I know you're a busy guy, and I appreciate this, unfortunately, under the circumstances, but I hope you'll come back another time and we get another update.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
All right, Chief Brice in Queen Creek.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.